Um, it's really nice to have everyone here. It's really especially nice to have you here, Jack. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction and context for people. As Clara just mentioned, my name's Alex. I'm split between the Department of Theater and the Advanced Computing Center for Art and Design. I teach media design, and it was working as a freelance media designer that I first got a chance to work with Jack at Mixed Blood. Though we'd had a chance to cross paths when I was at my graduate program at Arizona State. Um, Mixed Blood is an amazing place and an amazing theater from my perspective. Founded in 1976, is that right? 1976. And it's been in the heart of Minneapolis since then. Mixed Blood has won numerous awards, as so have you, Jack. I was just going through the list here at the moment, and there's some really wonderful recognitions that I see here. Mixed Blood's won the Ivy Awards, which is a local theater award in Minneapolis, numerous times. You yourself, Jack, have won the Lifetime Achievement Award through the Ivies, which is fantastic. You've also won the local legend at the United Negro College Fund, and there's so many other wonderful here's that I could go on about. You know, when this opportunity to have a conversation like this came up, it was my connection with having been at Mixed Blood for that moment, that one show that I got to be a part of, and seeing the culture of the people that I was able to work with, you know, from the costume designer to the management of the theater. I was blown away by how diverse and inclusive the space was, and how I was made welcome. So you know, when this opportunity came up, I was thinking I would love to share a conversation with you, Jack, and maybe see if we could leech some wonderful ideas off of the experience that you've had, and as well as guidance, right, as we look forward in the Department of Theater and at OSU with the social justice reality finally sort of revealing itself. I don't think that anything new has been revealed in terms of the problems and the troubles that we as a culture in the United States have. But definitely it seems like the tension and the focus has been renewed with the recent loss of life, and with George Floyd and so many other names that should be said and recognized. So I think it's a prescient time, right? And I also want to acknowledge, as you have pointed out to me, Jack, and as I was reading through your materials, we're two white guys, right? We're two white cis presenting men. And so there's a particular place in the conversation for us, but the conversation's much bigger than us. And so I'm hoping to hold that and still do some good work here today, knowing that this is not the entire conversation that may need to be had. So that said, I welcome Jack to OSU, to the theater community, to everybody who happens to be here today. And I was wondering, if there's anything that you'd like to do to introduce yourself before I kind of start peppering you, insulting you with questions.
Feel free. And, Jack Reuler, and I've worked at the Mixed Blood Theater for a long time.
Cool. Well, so I remember talking to you about this for a moment a while ago, but I was wondering if you could tell me sort of about the inception of Mixed Blood. Like, how did you find yourself in 1976, 2 years before I was born, founding Mixed Blood? What was going on with you, and how did you find yourself motivated to do that?
It was almost 2 years after I was born. So it was, no, I was 22 years old, and I was in college. So my family is 5 generations in the Twin Cities, and I was a zoology major planning to go to vet school, but also an activist and a disciple of, I mean, it sounds a little like a cliche now, but of Martin Luther King, a devotee. And in the year, so I was working for a social service agency known as the Center for Community Action. And my job during the school year was to seek out needs in the community and propose programs to meet those needs. And the prevailing racial politics of America at the time was called the melting pot theory, in which we were going to create one sort of homogenous, whitewashed, milquetoast American culture. And that's not what Dr. King had believed, and it wasn't what I had believed. And so it was also, America had a 200th birthday, that 1976 was called the bicentennial. And so to sort of celebrate the ideals of the country on, and there was a provoking incident that we can get into, but somehow between Memorial Day and Labor Day, through the theater, I was going to rid America of all of its isms. And 45 years later, I haven't gone to vet school, and I've barely made a dent in that work toward equity that we've been pursuing all these years. But we wanted to create a place that would model a world where people paid positive attention to difference, not no attention to difference.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a big piece of sheet metal looking for a lot of dents, but I can see you banging against it. What have been the important mile markers for you and for Mixed Blood since then and now? Like,
well, I mean, I will say that interestingly, it's been a great ride from 1976 to 2020, where we really tried to use the stage, and we got more and more sophisticated, and we did long-term investment into our relationship, and we really wanted to be a welcoming, inviting, affirming organization. And so through the shows we did in our own theater, which is this 1887 converted fire station, and we did probably 10,000 touring performances around the upper Midwest, and then other types of off-site work, trying to use theater to disrupt injustice, to create community, and to model equity. It's been a great ride. And over the years, it started out really as a race-based organization. And in that first company in 1976, we had a company of 23 full-time people, full-time making $110 a week or something. But there was 10 white, 7 African-American, 6 Native. And that made up this company that did 6 shows in 10 weeks and converted this old firehouse into a theater. But as time went on, it became race and culture and gender, and race, culture, and language. And then we became a home for immigrants and refugees, and a theatrical destination for people with disabilities, and then across the gender continuum. And we've continued to just open our wings and bring more people in as time has gone by, so that it is a place where where everyone is welcome, and where they can see themselves reflected on stage in important ways. And in the neighborhood, the block on which we live has 5,000 people on our block, and they come from 63 countries and speak 92 languages, but it's mostly an East African Muslim community. And that happened about 20 years ago, and there was this change. And so that really was an important part in our growth as an organization, and that we could decide to be an island in the community that we'd been an anchor, or really be an anchor. And so our devotion to our community, to use theater to create a healthy community, with health being defined by not just the arts, but safety and healthcare and recreation and employment and education. And then, but then came COVID and George Floyd. So as we speak, I live 10 blocks from where George Floyd died. The theater is 10 blocks from where the closing arguments in that trial are going on right now. And I think it really, when you look at where those important mileposts, it really was, of all of them, there have been many sort of reinventions of Mixed Blood over time, that I think our greatest asset has been that adaptability has been our sustainability. But I think when COVID hit and theater was deemed not essential, and not only not essential, but on the lowest tier of essential, we sort of took that personally. And then when George Floyd died, and I've been sort of a Pollyanna cheerleader for the Twin Cities all my life, and I think I had to rethink and recant that. And certainly, I mean, yesterday I was in Brooklyn Center, and there was Jesse Jackson, and it's quite, it's a stain on our community, but it's a mirror to the whole country. And I think we somehow had looked in the mirror and seen one Minneapolis, and now we see a different one reflecting out to the rest of the world. But how this year changed us was it was really important that when we took it personally that we were deemed not essential as an industry when the field you're in has assembling people for a common shared experience is your signature, and it's illegal to do that. What do you do, and how do you become, an artistic first responder in these times? And that really led us to. And then when George Floyd happened, half of Minneapolis, the half that we're in, became a food desert, and that you couldn't get groceries, and we became took our asset, which was our building in its particular location, and turned it into a food shelter and COVID testing and voter registration and census taking and flu shots, and really tried to really dig even deeper in the community. But over the years, I don't know if I'm completely getting off topic, we've really dug deep in using theater within, and this is always, virtuosic theater that we like to believe, so that we don't become hyphenated theater. We're not good political theater, experimental theater, race-based theater, that we can meet any theater at the crossroads of quality and meet or exceed them. And so we have had long investments in healthcare, in the legal profession, in the disability world, in trans Minnesotans, in immigrants and refugees, and on and on. For the first 10 years, because there was no canon of theatrical literature about what our mission was, we were commissioning, developing, and producing new plays. And then 10 years later, we realized there was such a thing as a new play universe, and we'd already been part of it for a decade. But there's all those things that we have become part of and they're never opportunistic. Like, we get some funding and we do something, and then when that funding runs out, we stop doing it. That we just our wings keep getting bigger and bigger as we move forward. Anyway, I'll shush for a second.
Oh, no, no, I love it. I mean, there's so many things in there that I just want to ask more questions about. I mean, and you're really pointing, I think, at one of my deep curiosities, which is, and it seems like you're pointing at it with the new work. But what are there's so many theaters in the world, right? And I'm sitting in one, and we are looking for actively right now opportunities and ways into doing better. There's so much better that we could be doing in terms of opening ourselves and being inclusive to all of the people, all the people, and some of whom you're explicitly identifying. And I'm curious, what does new work mean? What does re-envisioning old work mean? And what have been some of the biggest successes that you've had in there?
Well, successes certainly aren't based on attendance. They're based on how you move your mission forward. I think that the mission of a nonprofit is not something you raise funds with. It's actually something you try to realize. And I think that a mission is ultimately successful when you're no longer necessary, that we don't raise money to keep our doors open, but rather to close them and say mission accomplished. So there have been many. I mean, I think that one of those things that Mixed Blood's been recognized for, and again, it was something, we live in this little corner in Minneapolis, and I've really, just because of my family's duration there, tried to influence, policy and attitude and behavior of Twin Cityans. But there's been a ripple effect, and I'm always thrilled to hear that people outside of Minnesota have heard of Mixed Blood. And so I just think that we started something in 2011 called Radical Hospitality. But Radical Hospitality is sort of best recognized by the outside world as free admission, that anybody can see any show at Mixed Blood for free. We don't actually have earned income as a major component of our business model. But that was really the outgrowth of years of trying to do things where we just said, if asked the question, who are we willing to discriminate against? The answer always needs to be nobody. And then how do we do that? We literally, over a period of time, did focus groups with those one-way mirrors, and had leaders of groups, and just said, what are your barriers to participation in live theater in general, Mixed Blood more specifically? And we just said, we're going to tackle all of those and try to overcome them. And that's not easy in an 1887 building with all its things, but we have really worked on that. And the one thing we heard from everybody is this perception that theater is a white elitist art form, and that people can't afford to go. And so what we had done, and here's really one of the things that led the conversation, we had a big focus on doing Latinx work since the 80s. And so for 30 years, we've done shows by, about, foreign with Latinos, and Spanish and English with bilingual casts. And then we had a significant role in the disability world, where we wanted to be, as I said, an artistic home for artists and audiences with disabilities. And so we got some funds to let Latinos in the Twin Cities come in at a greatly discounted rate. Then we got money to let people with self-identify as having disabilities come in for free, and we also get them free transportation, free cab rides to and from the theater. And then the people in our zip code, as I was saying this, it's not only an East African Muslim community, but it's also generally a poor community. It's high density. It's and so we got funds so that everybody in our zip code could come to our theater for free. And then beyond that, and we started realizing that we were segregating our own audiences in ways that was antithetical to who we were. And so much like free and reduced meals, we just said, we're going to let everybody come for free. And it really was, I think that was a major step forward in just people's perception of us. On the inside, we actually never had taken in that much in ticket revenue in the first place, probably 18% of our budget. And so that went from 18% to almost nothing. But it's been great because it changed the composition of the audience in terms of race, in terms of class, in terms of age. 52% of our audiences are under 30 years old. In terms of disability, we're really good at surveying, and 7% of our audiences say they've never been to a live piece of theater before. So, it really needs to be not only what are you doing in the artistic work you're doing, and then who needs to be in the audience for it to really combust, and then how do you get those people in the audience? And so we've really looked at all prongs of that. And the neighborhood in which we live, this sort of global village on our block, is emblematic of the global village that we try to promote.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting when I think that when I did my little bit of work with you guys at the theater, it was maybe the first or second year that you had started, explicitly doing the radical hospitality. And I do understand that sort of like the easiest thing to kind of explain that to people is like, oh, we don't, pay what you want for the tickets or don't pay anything at all. But there was, yeah, and I guess you sort of just restated it here in a different way, but it seems part and parcel for the whole thread in Mixed Blood, right? It seems to be like a sort of a new expression of that, but it actually seems to be pointing towards that core mission.
Yeah, it does. I think radical hospitality is not an initiative or a program; it's a core value. So we don't just, how do we lead with generosity? How do we make relationships, not money, our currency? And by doing that, it's really the money is followed. But it is, really meeting people where they are. And I'd say the biggest change we're making on the backside, as we make new theater after COVID, is we've always said we're going to do these really important plays about things we think you'll find interesting that you need to be made, or wherever you need to act upon. And then you have important conversations after seeing it, and we do them really well. And we really have sort of flipped that to say we want to be part of your story. So we have this really big listening is a huge part of what we do. And we're going to listen and invest over a long period of time in what we're doing. And there will still be virtuosic theater that comes out of it. But for each show we do, it will be just a part of a bigger continuum of investment in a community or in a topic or something that we have decided to tackle because we've listened, not because we've said, here's something we want to talk about.
And how have you opened your ears? Like, what are the ways that you're engaging with that listening and making?
We have these listening sessions. We have town halls. where we really just invite bodies of people. So a lot of theaters have across the country, and arts organizations in general have an outreach director. And oftentimes that outreach director, their job is to connect with all the different communities in that region and be the face of that institution to all those people. And they're set up to fail. And oftentimes they're the most vaulted person of color in a position of leadership, and they're set up to fail. And so what we did about 12 years ago was we have a bunch of year-round part-time organizers from different communities. We've got a trans organizer, we have a Latinx organizer, we've got a disability organizer, we've got a Cedar Riverside, that's our neighborhood organizer, and some others, and they have their own advisory council. So we have these deep tentacles into different communities, and we gather these people and whomever else they want to bring, and we listen, say, how can we be, not how can you help us find an audience for our shows, how can we be of service to your community? And then we set up, sometimes it's programming and sometimes it's services and sometimes it's space, but we're in service to the constituents that care about what we do and what we stand for.
That's awesome. And so, you know, there's this interesting piece of theater, right, which you've actually gotten bigger than, right? But like in my theater sort of mentality, one of the core things that theater organizations or theater groups do is they figure out what their season is going to be, and then they promote that season, and then they cast that season, and they sort of do that with certain suppositions of who their audiences are and who may be available to play those parts. And I'm really sort of curious, right? Like how do I mean, it sounds like the answer is already in some of what you've already said, but how do you approach season or the casting
Well,
piece?
I think that, and I hope it doesn't sound like heresy, but I think seasons are really internal constructs that theaters do to organize their budget and organize their calendar. But to the outside world, I don't know how important a season is. And when you start so I'm just going to go back a second. When we shifted into this regional nonprofit regional theater movement in the early 60s, we tried to decentralize theater from New York and London. So the theater that was done in America was generated by those communities. And subscription is one of those interesting things, but the job of a nonprofit artistic director is to lead audiences to see that which they don't yet know they want to see. And when you start saying, what does our audience want to see, and make your programming decisions based on that, it's really time to get a new job, in my opinion. That if that's the domain of the commercial theater, is what do you want to see? We'll do that. And then it becomes a widget for which you hope your ticket sales exceed the costs of making the production. But if we are indeed to be visionaries that are trying to advance the art form, as well as what's being said, I mean, I think that what we learned during COVID is, if we are to be essential, that our stages really do need to be soapboxes, and our artists need to be town criers, and we need to be talking about things that are important. And I will say something that, again, I think will not be well received, but it's like coming out against pollution. I think that that the vaccine coming out as early as it did, that older white people make up the subscribers and the donors and the patrons of many large theaters. And during COVID, after George Floyd, with the release of We See White American Theater, there has been a lot of important discussions being happening in theaters across the country. And I think they really are trying to get their anti-racist policies going, and their own practices. But the culture should, because old white people got vaccinated first, and the vaccine took as little time to be developed as it was, there's going to be this change in optics, that there are going to be more different people in higher positions in a lot of theaters. But I think those same people are going to come back and be donors and subscribers and patrons. And the overall culture shift that will change the programming, that will change all sorts of important things, won't have happened before people are able to come back and be what they've been. and that saddens me a little bit that I think we really had an opportunity. Don't get me wrong, 560,000 people have died. We want the vaccine, but just in this one little myopic thing, the culture of the American theater and really being able to, uh, operationalize. We see white American theater and many other things that are collateral to that won't have happened yet.
Yeah.
Was I on top of that?
So, so what advice might you then have for a group that is stuck in that, or that comes or is coming from that as their heritage, but is looking to do something new, and right, or like right, how do we, like, sort of, right, so at OSU, right, so we are a nonprofit, but we're training students in in their careers. Some of that will be corporate, some, or capitalist and widgety, and some of that will not. Some of them will be teachers, and some of them will go off into other careers, but take the education that came from it with them. I'm wondering, sort of, for someone that is maybe stuck but willing to consider a different way forward, what advice do you have for institutions like that are thinking about their seasons and thinking about
We can think about seasons, but we can also think about structure. As a land grant university that has faculty with tenure, a lot of I will say that I think Mixed Blood's greatest cross to bear is having me, white guy, as its artistic director. And so one of those things I am going to do, starting to be announced in about 2 weeks, is really step aside so there can be new, younger leadership and it's not just about age, it's really about race, gender, culture that needs to be leading the field. And so, if you're going to have leadership changes, which are going to change the culture, which are going to change the staffing, which is going to change the programming, those are big decisions that happen in a place like yours. Our tenure track full professors are going to step aside so that others may take their place, so that the culture of the institution and the training's focus can change. Those are questions you have to ask yourself. But certainly you can do different programming, and certainly you can recruit students. And it's never okay to say we're doing this kind of programming and nobody shows up to audition. That's blaming the victim for the crime. So there's a lot of things we can do. And how do we have good identity conscious casting? And I think that can be done very well, probably better in the academic theater than in professional theater.
Talk to me about that. I'm really interested in that, because there's so many sides to that conversation that I've recently been made aware of. Right, in this wonderful sort of document that you shared with me, which is Mixed Blood's vision of the of their future, and you mention in this that right, you have cast, like, trans performers in roles that were not written as trans characters, and so I am aware of, like, other choices like that change the aesthetics or the meaning making of work, and it seems like you've always been very deft in what I'm aware of in Mixed Blood. You use that as a tool, and I was wondering if you can or if I've got that right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to do, what we used to call culture conscious casting, and then over time it just became identity conscious casting, because there's so much that makes us us. But I don't think that we're not putting a spin in it. It's when people do it differently, when people cast able-bodied actors in roles of characters with disabilities, when people, and there's so many ways in which that's done poorly. But yeah, so we will do plays with trans characters in them, for example, as you use that example, and have trans actors playing those roles. But we'll also cast trans actors in roles for which they're just the best actor often. And I think by opening our casting a broader net for talent has only been to the benefit of mixed blood, that other people are very limited in what they do. But to really make it be, you know, again, a welcoming, inviting, affirming place, uh, there needs to be a lot of things in the culture of the organization that you can't just cast somebody and not do all the things to make them welcome and invited. And that's true in terms of race. It's true in terms of language. It's true in terms of culture. It's true in terms of disability. Um, and but it always has an upside. And if you start saying it costs too much to do that, or they don't come to audition, you need to do the recruiting. You need to recruit students to apply to OSU, to be in shows at OSU from other than the theater department. And really, I promise it'll only be a win-win situation for those students, the university, and the department, and the faculty, and the other students.
Thank you. Yeah, I see that your example or the example of mixed blood is proof that this is possible, I think. Um,
We don't think we're doing anything special. It's just other people are not doing it right. And I don't want to be, I am not the arbiter of right, but there's a
and
lot
I,
of power imbalances in the American theater.
well, I respect that. And I would hate to say that I am aware of any pinnacles of perfection anywhere. uh, uh, one, at this point, I'm just looking at the time and I'm thinking of our audience, and I want to make sure that I invite those who are part of the audience to send or add any questions or guiding interests that you may have, because I could talk to Jack for hours about the things that I'm curious about. But I would love to introduce your voices there. I haven't seen any show up there, so if Clara, if you've seen any that shown up, I may be looking at the wrong place, but I would encourage anyone that wants to jump out. And with that sort of placed, maybe as sort of a side, and again, this is a personal question from my sort of awareness of mixed blood's history. I know that for a moment, and perhaps continuing, that mixed blood had a relationship with the Paisley Palace and with Prince. And I remember sort of, you casually mentioned, that you might have some stories or memories around that. And and I'm thinking also in the context of the conversations that what we've already been talking about. But I was just wondering if there was anything in there that I might tease out of you.
You might just tease me for it. I mean, I'd say that one of my great pleasures in my career has been ushering in the next generation of theater leaders. And I've gotten to, because I don't really believe in validation. A lot of times we'll say, oh, look, someone went to Yale or they performed on Broadway, or did did something, and that makes them good. And I just don't see it as like, I see that you're good or you're not good. And so I've had really a privilege, just like meeting you in grad school, of being able to meet some fantastic talent on the early parts of their career, and been privileged to be able to work with them. But when I was 21, before Mixed Blood, I was on this Minneapolis Park Board committee to find the bands that played in the parks. We have a lot of parks in Minneapolis, and there's a lot of concerts in the summer. And someone said, you need to come over. My kids are playing in this tennis court in this park in North Minneapolis. And, they're 16 and 17, and I was a big 21-year-old. And I went, I was like, nah, they're too young. Well, it was Prince and Jesse Johnson and Andre Simone. And so there I rejected Prince at the age of 21. But later on, we got to know one another a bit. And so when Mixed Blood had its 40th birthday party a few years ago, he said we could do it at Paisley Park. And so we sold 1,000 tickets, and he was going to come and say hello to everybody. And then he died 3 weeks before the event. And still the family said, come on, bring it on. And then the courts, because he had no will, stopped it about 5 days short. So my last interaction with Prince's estate was really a lawsuit.
Oh,
And
no.
similarly, another one of my really terrible things was there was a sort of chain smoking poet that had written a play called Black Bart of the Sacred Hill, and it was really not a good play. And I think it's had one production ever. And he kept pitching this play and pitching this play, and I was like, I just don't like your play. I mean, I put it in the trunk of my car for traction in the winter. Big play. And but it was August Wilson who lived in St. Paul, and so yet another time. So while I've had great luck discovering people on the front end of their career, there's two super boo-boos that I did not.
Oops.
But
Well,
I will say that we have had, people like Don Cheadle who worked at Mixed Blood when he was 22, and any of a number of people who we've been blessed to know on the front end and have always remembered us as they've moved forward.
oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate those stories. You know, the one question that popped up here, I think that we did sort of answer it, but it might be worth explicitly sort of stating again. Uh, but the question, as it was phrased, was: have you ever considered rotating the position of the artistic director at the theater in order to give women and people of color more opportunities? And
As I said, I'm going to step aside, but I think more importantly, I think that the leadership of theaters moving forward, and not even actually has started already, is a much flatter, uh, more shared leadership. It takes longer. It's a more difficult process. But I do think that is how organizations moving forward will work, where there'll be a lot of people in a consensus driven model. And it's why I just I hire really smart people. I stay out of their way. And I listen, and I try to always, I'm the other in a community at Mixed Blood. And so I just try to be quiet and let people do what they do really well and support them to do it fantastically.
awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And one of the things that I guess that I might offer, I could put this in the text for everybody to just read it, but I have been particularly struck by Mixed Blood's anti-racism and anti-bias 2021 statement. I mean, from the beginning of it to the end of it, like there's a lot of really, I think, important ideas in there. And one of the things that I think stands out to me in it is that even with the history that you have, right, even with the purpose of equity being built into it since 1976, you're recognizing that it was, and I think I'll literally read it here: founded and led by a heterosexual white cisgendered male, Mixed Blood is operated within a structure of systemic racism and culture of white supremacy and privilege that impacts our entire society. And we acknowledge benefiting from the perpetuation of this structure in spite of the dedication to promoting the work of BIPOC, trans, and disabled artists. And I feel like statements like this are hard to make sometimes by individuals, right? Like, I need to, as a white man, also own the privilege that I have gotten to get where I'm at the moment.
Well, it's not also, Alex, it's actually you in particular. I mean, racism is a white people problem. It is. So we need to own that, and the real important conversations need to be had among white people if there's really going to be any significant change.
Yeah.
I also, you're saying, what are some of those things you can do? And because all of these isms are, capitalism is at the root of them. And if we can change the flow of dollars. So as a theater department, as you go to buy lumber and costumes and all those things, find those businesses that are owned by people, that if you change the flow of dollars from Amazon to their businesses or from Home Depot to their businesses, you can actually change the economic structure of a community. And then that's another really tangible thing you can do. And it might cost a little more, but it'll be a payoff. It's the same thing that, to hire people with disabilities to be in your show or be in your department, whether faculty or staff or students, is going to take what some would call accommodation. It is only doing the right thing. You're not actually, you don't want to be someone giving a handout. The handout needs to be from them. We need to feel privileged to have somebody come and work in our world or train in our world. So because there is a sense, you have jobs, we need jobs, give us a job, that that we're giving them the handout, but it's really quite the opposite. We should feel blessed that they want to be part of our universe and embrace that in the ways that allow them to succeed.
I really appreciate that. I've got a comment here. It says creating space for BIPOC, LGBTQ plus disabled artists and women to lead is so important. Thank you for discussing this. What sort of systemic change has been successful at Mixed Blood that the theater community could engage with in order to support leadership from underrepresented folks in our field?
I mean, again, I think that I think mentorship is an overused and improperly used term, but we have participated in a number of programs, whether it's through grad schools, which we've had a number of nice relationships, but the National New Play Network has a producer in residence program, and TCG, the service organization, nonprofit professional theater, has something called Leadership U, and they used to have something called New Generations. And there have been a number of those things where people get paid to come in and be part of our organization. And a lot of those people have gone on to become artistic directors elsewhere. So I think that really taking that seriously and making sure that someone's experience with you sets them up to be a leader, a manager, a visionary, is just an important part of what we need to do. And so, nothing would be more thrilling for me than the person, and it's a board decision, like who's going to be the next artistic director of Mixed Blood, but wouldn't it be awesome with somebody who'd actually cut their teeth at Mixed Blood? I don't know that that'll happen, and there's going to be a lot of applicants, and there'll be a good choice made. But yeah, and I think we as a field are starting to embrace that. Those are a lot of what happens in the American professional theater is that people think that the way to become an artistic director is become an associate artistic director, and never, really, I mean, almost never does an associate artistic director become the artistic director of their own organization. And so there, when someone says I'm an associate artistic director, I'm saying, so you're looking for a job? Because, that they will be in the candidate pool for an artistic directorship in the not too distant future. But it's going to happen. And really the real change that needs to happen in the professional theater of the regional theater movement is change at the top of board leadership. If there's board leadership changes, then there will be staff leadership changes, then there will be culture changes, then there'll be programmatic changes, and the people that we want to have working in the field, whether on or off stage or in the staff or boardroom, will change to be a reflection of the world we hope to have.
Yeah. I hear you pointing to a number of systemic things that could be addressed, from sourcing of raw materials from local companies to leadership, right? There's sort of maybe different levels of approach on this. One of the statements in your document here is that at Mixed Blood, a budget is a moral document reflecting an institution that walks its talk. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the actualization of that.
A budget is a moral document that you need to put your resources where your values are. And so, just as we've been saying, if you believe there needs to be a change in programming that's going to take certain people, what is it going to take to identify those people, recruit those people, hire and retain those people, accommodate those people? And that lives on any of a number of fronts. That just you can't say, well, we need a better printer, we all need computers, and that's more important than the programming we do or the staffing of that programming. Mission realization still needs to be the litmus test against every decision that's made. And oftentimes in the budgeting process, there's this fixed cost versus variable cost. And when things get tight, all too many organizations look to things programmatic as the variable cost to trim. And yet the real reason people support philanthropically theaters is because of their mission realization, and the delivery system of that is your programming. So if you're cutting programming so that you can keep staff or you can keep the lights on or whatever it is, you've got misplaced priorities and your budget isn't a moral document.
I really appreciate that perspective. I'm following your thought on that. Um, is there any network facing opportunities, any Zoom like performances that Mixed Blood is doing? If people were curious to be able to engage and see your programming, is there a
Well,
way for that
just
right
to
now?
give an example, again, I think this is the new Mixed Blood that's coming out of a new strategic plan that came out of doing strategic planning during COVID. So we've taken housing security and housing insecurity as a major topic that we're investing some years into. And we'd started this before COVID. And so every month for the last year and a half, we do these organizing events where we take housing policymakers and service providers, people experiencing homelessness, and artists. And we have these workshops where we use art to and try to infuse imagination into the policymaking process. And from that, over a period of, and we're doing it in 4 cities, LA, DC, the Twin Cities, and Syracuse, New York, just because of certain partnerships. And from that is coming a show that will be done live in each of those 4 cities, but also we'll have a virtual presentation in June. And really it's Alex's guru from Arizona State, Jake Pinholster, who is kind of the technologist that is giving it the many platforms that will allow it to not just be a Zoom reading, but actually a fully developed live virtual production. And that'll be on June 9th and 10th. But it will not be, I mean, I have found virtual programming in the last year to be sleep inducing. And I really think that we are intending and working hard to, we want everything we do to have a call to action now, not just a suggestion, but actually those for whom it's intended, what is the call to action? And so this particular June 9th and 10th thing has been commissioned by a national organization on housing, New Habits called. So it'll be a little bit insider baseball and in the weeds for housing policy wonks, but it'll also be a spectacular piece of art. So I will get Alex the link to that when it's going to happen if you'd like to see that. But then in the fall, for example, again, as we try to reinvent ourselves, sometimes theaters get in the way of theater and sometimes plays get in the way of theater. And so we're going to do a show. It's a show about race and philanthropy, but we're doing it at the city zoo where the audience moves from, primate house to giraffe grotto to the big cat house to the polar bear pool to the sea lions and tropical adventures. The audience moves with this, and it's a play seen through a lens of species preservation and conservation and education, but it's about race and philanthropy. But the audience will move to 8 different places, and it starts with a helicopter landing and ends with a sea lion jumping. But it is a great play developed over, we had these listening sessions with zookeepers and animal collection curators and zoo directors and PETA zoo haters and primatologists and all kinds of other people. And so one of the things I got out of 2020 was actually a respect for science and an appreciation of intellectual rigor that the theater up until now is sort of, both of those things have been no-nos. And so this is a play, while it would be these heady conversations sometimes between a couple of primatologists, you're seeing it with a colony of gorillas and orangutans behind it. And then, so it's really, and the theme of the show is, does the good of the many supersede the good of the individual? And that theme repeats itself scene after scene after scene. But in the end, what is the relationship between race and philanthropy? And because, again, philanthropy is based on capitalism, there's inherent power imbalances, and how can we flatten those out using theater as our delivery system?
Wow. So the zoology has come back from the very beginning.
Some of our site-specific work, I do think that as we move forward as a field, that which we've called vanity projects or site-specific work will really become a much greater percentage. If it's been 2 or 3% of all productions in the American theater over the years, I think that eventually it will occupy a much greater place. And I think that stages and seats and performances and audiences and plays and intimacy will not be the gold standard. It'll be just a standard.
Wow. I I love I I love the future where theater has grown and evolved and shed some of its troubles. uh, and I'm so grateful to get to talk to you today, Jack. Selfishly, this is a conversation I've been very much looking forward to. If there are any final questions, this is last call for those. Get them in quick because this is me vamping for them. But
Well, I think in your world, Alex, let me tie your world into the future. That for the last 100+ years, the death knell for live theater, when movies were invented and when broadcast TV was invented and when cable and VCRs came along and when the internet came, we all thought, oh, this is going to be the death of live theater. And yet we all just continue to find our share of mind. But more specifically to your areas, that I do think that VR and AR are going to be the next thing that we need to share of mind with. And so by figuring out how to incorporate virtual reality and augmented reality into narrative and storytelling and into live theater, if we can get on the front end of that, I do think there's an opportunity, and the place for that is really in large academic institutions that have the wherewithal. So I think it's somewhere theater is going, and I am very excited. Sometimes the military and gaming and porn kind of beat us to the punch, that they have the resource to invest in narrative and the new technology, but let's not let that.
well, that makes me very happy because that's been at the core of my recent research, is working with virtual reality and storytelling and narrative, producing and devising new work in that space. I worked on a very small project, which is called the Dementia Project, where we created we had an artist. We have an artist, Dreama Cleaver, who, from her own personal experience in life, is a caregiver for her parents living with dementia, and that was translated into an experience that we were able to in turn share with caregivers. And I have to admit that of all the theater that I've done in the last 3 or 4 years, some of the most powerful, emotional, and I think truly life-changing experiences have come out of the empathy that was built in those. So I do see the power of it, and I would love to find a way to make it right, because VR and AR to a certain extent suffer these privilege issues where the equipment is expensive and the information that it takes to get it to work is fixed within these elitist structures. So yes, I have more work to do too, even in the bleeding edge of things. Jack, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your time, and I love seeing the picture of Mixed Blood behind you, and remember walking in and out of the doors, and hope to do so again soon.
So behind that building is the University of Minnesota, the Big Ten competitor of Ohio State.
Excellent. I'm sorry. I know that my microphone's causing some weird echoey stuff. Yes. Anytime you want to come and enjoy a game here, I would love to host you, and I look forward to future friendly competitions between us. If anybody end up having a question for Jack, his email's available at the Mixed Blood website. I'd recommend you reach out to him directly.
I'll do it very myself.
And if anybody wants to reach me, you can find me. I'm Oliszewski.1 at osu.edu. I would love to talk to anybody that came to see this and has thoughts and wants to continue the conversation. Clara Davison, thank you so much for organizing all of this and making sure that we had captioning. And thank you to the captioner and to everyone else that's working behind the scenes to make this happen. And thank you most of all to the people that took the time to come and share this moment with us. And I look forward to the next time we get to chat, and we'll see you on another day.
Thank you so much.